Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh Hewitt today. He is taking the day off. He will be back on Monday. It is a couple of days after the Christmas holiday, and normally it's kind of the silly season. It's the end of the year collection of news reports about, the year that was. They're starting to build up to New Year's. The top 10 lists of the year of whatever subject is usually what starts coming out this time of year. But there is actual real news going on. And I'm going to try to do my best to bring that to you over the next couple of hours. And there is a civil war, if you will, brewing in MAGA world, or at least an attempt by regime media to foment a civil war in MAGA world. And I don't think there's much to it. I think it's a lot of noise, but we'll go into that in the bottom of the hour. When I went to bed last night getting ready for the show, I'm thinking to myself, so what are we going to talk about 2 days after Christmas? The one subject I did not have on my bingo card was H-1B visas. But apparently that's what everybody's talking about online. A lot of people are talking about what Vivek Ramaswamy came out with yesterday, and lots of back and forth in response to it. It made the cable nets. And regime media is seeing now a point of exploitation between Donald Trump and the Doge committee, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. And they're trying to make a big deal out of this to maybe drive a wedge there. I'm not buying it other than Vivek was being Vivek and got a little out in front of his skis, which he is kind of wont to do at times. Many listeners to this show and viewers of this show on the Salem News Channel have seen that over the last year and a half with Vivek. Nice guy, great guy. He's still not exactly 100% on policy. Stephen Miller is the policy guy that's going to be advising the president-elect on immigration issues, so I would take what he has to say with a little more seriousness. But we're going to get into a lot of that as the couple hours here progress. I do want to get to the actual news that happened between when we last spoke with Ed Morrissey guest hosting. And that is, right when we were going off the air, Israel had it up to here with provocation and ballistic missile attacks launched out of Yemen by Houthis, the one of the many different proxy terror groups that are financed and equipped by the Islamic Republic of Iran. And Israel said, we're pretty much done with this, and sent a bunch of warplanes to Yemen. And this is a Times of Israel report from midday yesterday. Israel warplanes struck Houthi forces in Yemen Thursday in response to repeated ballistic missile and drone attacks on Israel, which have ramped up in recent weeks. The strikes, a mission that dozens of Israeli Air Force fighter jets took part in, alongside refuelers and spy planes, followed days of increasingly bellicose threats from Israeli leaders vowing to decimate the Iran-backed terror group after nearly daily attacks. There had been 4 straight attacks on Israeli cities where ballistic missiles were dropping into neighborhoods. And there's no reason Israel's going to put up with this. Fortunately, Joe Biden is on vacation again in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, so he is unavailable for comment. He's pretty much been unavailable for comment for the last 4 years, but he's no longer an operating factor in what Israel does, and that's actually kind of a good thing. It's kind of too bad, but it's a good thing that Israel is now acting in their own self-defense. What got hit was their main power generating plants. Their electrical grid is now offline. The international airport at Sana'a, their capital city, is now destroyed. Tedros, the UN World Health Organization director, was actually in Yemen and was about ready to board a plane to get out of Yemen when the bombing took place. and couldn't get out of Yemen. So he's upset and the UN's upset. Too bad. That's just kind of an added bonus. The interesting thing about the Israeli strike that I kind of smiled at is the rebel leader of the Houthis was actually on television at the time in Yemen holding a press conference. And he was updating everybody in Yemen of how successful things were going when the bombs started falling, and he had to hastily cut his press conference short and get off the air because they were under attack. It's kind of a remarkable period of time. And, of course, at the same time, there was some strikes on targets in Gaza as Israel has not completely turned their back on terrorist groups there. Islamic Jihad cover organizations were still working in parts of Gaza, and in a van that was labeled as a Islamic Jihad front group, 5 reporters, allegedly journalists, were in that van that got killed. And of course, the world has the vapors about that. Turns out they were terrorists that were covering as journalists. So all that's going on 2 days after Christmas. That's not the only thing of interest going on. Here on the home front, the Wall Street Journal, for the second time in a week, has come out with an explosive, very heavily researched article. This one by Michael Gordon and Warren Strobel. Of course, last week we learned in a lengthy front page story that Joe Biden was not only unfit to be president and run for re-election, he was unfit to be president as soon as he took the oath of office, maybe even before. There was all sorts of detailed reportage in the Journal about how as soon as he took the oath of office, he got into the presidential motorcade and did the parade and went to the White House. From the moment he stepped foot into the West Wing, his staff was protecting him from his own staff, from his own agency heads, from the media, from the press, from foreign dignitaries, screening everything ahead of time to make sure that nobody got too close, nobody got to put 2 and 2 together to start to figure out that Joe Biden was mentally incapacitated. He was a walking 25th Amendment from the first day of his term 4 years ago. One of the reasons why his presidency has been an abject disaster. Jason Riley, in the opinion page of the Journal of the Day, Biden's legacy will be his mental decline, and it's a hard-hitting piece, starting with the Robert Hur report, the special counsel that did not pursue charges against Joe Biden for mishandling classified documents because, in his estimation and his team's estimation, Joe Biden was so unfit that he would never be able to get a jury to convict him because he wasn't unfit. He wasn't fit enough to be able to stand trial. And it goes on from there. Look, there is lots out there that I want to get to today. At the White House, Karine Jean-Pierre actually did hold a press briefing. First one she's held in, a week, 10 days or so. And Peter Doocy showed up and hammered her, and it was actually kind of fun to listen to. Cut number 16.
How are you doing with all of this, Karine?
You care about how I feel?
Are you going to stick around for a potential President Harris administration?
Oh my goodness, let me just get through the day. Can I just get through today?
I do have some other questions.
No, I think that's good. I think we're good.
Karine.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, thank you.
I haven't seen you in a while.
Well, you guys haven't had a press briefing since President Biden dropped out of the race. So
The president hasn't been here. He just got here yesterday. And now I'm here taking your questions.
Thank you.
And I've taken about 3 or 4 at this point from you alone.
That wasn't the only exchange they had, and it got kind of more testy as time went on. I've got a ton of stuff I'm going to bring for you today. Edward Isaac DeVore, who is a Beltway reporter and a lefty, was on CNN, and he came to the conclusion that, yeah, even amongst regime Beltway types, what it seems to be is Joe Biden is only going to be remembered as the guy in between Donald Trump terms. That's not really what you want your legacy to be if you're a person on the left. The nightmare that is the Biden administration, and we're starting to see different people in regime media kind of tacitly admit that, yeah, the last 4 years were really not that good. Chris Cillizza did his little mea culpa. You're seeing other people start to say, well, okay, well, maybe he really wasn't the best pick. And as it turns out, maybe Kamala Harris wasn't the best pick either. They still don't like what's going to happen in 25 days when Donald Trump takes over, and they're gearing up to try to, sow dissent wherever they can and pick apart the Trump administration. But everybody's gearing up for Inauguration Day, 25 days from now, and what the president is going to do and how he's going to roll out his new administration. And you can be part of that, actually. There's still time, but you're running out of time to get into the lotto, the drawing for the Trump inauguration VIP experience that Salem is offering. You can win a trip for two to D.C., tickets to the Trump inauguration, and tickets to an inaugural ball, which is actually kind of quite the thing if you ever have a chance to go. All you need to do to enter is text Trump, T-R-U-M-P, to 94878. That's 94878. And you just text the word Trump, and you can be entered in that drawing. Sounds like a lot of fun if you want to at least try it. You never know. You might win. I'll tell you who did win is thousands of kids whose parents are incarcerated and missed out on being with their kids during Christmas. And these kids didn't have access to Christmas presents beforehand, didn't have access to their parents through no fault of their own. But Angel Tree, the work of Prison Fellowship, stepped in, thanks to your efforts on behalf of this program and across Salem network-wide. And we changed the lives of tons of kids. And from all of us at Salem, we thank you very, very much. Now that we're at the year end, and people are analyzing kind of where their finances are, and they do a lot of their year-end gifting about this time between Christmas and New Year's. Sometimes it goes to your local church. Sometimes you find other ministries to donate to get in your charitable donation before tax season. Consider a year-end gift to Angel Tree and Prison Fellowship. Why? Because it's not just the Christmas tree, the Angel Tree program they do. They also do summer camps. They do sporting camps for kids throughout the year. They keep trying to reach these kids all the way through the year while their parents are incarcerated to try to break that cycle. And you can be part of that with a generous donation. 888-206-2764 is the number to call. 888-206-2764. Or you can go to HughHewitt.com and click on that banner that says Change Prisoners' Lives in 2025. So help if you can. Thank you if you already have. And we will see kind of what Angel Tree does in the coming year. I want to play one little bit of video if I can. This is, again, Peter Doocy and Corinne Jean-Pierre mixing it up at the White House. Cut number 17.
2 days since somebody allegedly tried to kill Donald Trump again. And you're here at the podium in the White House briefing room calling him a threat. How many more assassination attempts on Donald Trump until the president and the vice president and you pick a different word to describe Trump other than threat?
Peter, if anything from this administration, I actually completely disagree with the premise of your question, the question that you're asking. It is also incredibly dangerous in the way that you're asking it, because American people are watching. And to say that from an administration who has consistently condemned political violence, from an administration where the president called the former president and was thankful, grateful that he was okay, from an administration who has called out January 6th, called out the attack of Paul Pelosi, called out and said we need to lower the temperature after the Butler incident.
You know what makes this so much easier to listen to? Is the fact that you know that she is going to be gone in 25 days, banished to the Elba Island of American politics, which is MSNBC. I want to cover this massive story in the Wall Street Journal that appeared yesterday. And it just, it vindicates so many people. It vilifies so many people at the same time about the origins of the COVID virus. Now, you might recall, if you've been a longtime listener of this program, that one of our favorite guests, that somebody that we have known personally for a very, very, very long time, is Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. He started coming on this show weekly when he was a candidate for Congress in Arkansas. And we liked the cut of his jib back then because he was really good at doing media back then. And we talked to him quite frequently as a candidate. And then once he became a congressperson, we talked to him almost every week as well. And then when the Senate seat opened up in Arkansas and he filed papers to run, he virtually lived on this show as a candidate. And once he was elected, he's been a weekly guest as a senator from Arkansas ever since. And when the COVID virus came down, and we were trying to figure out where it came from, and you know, you can't figure out how to combat it, and you can't figure out how to counter it or what to do in response unless you knew where it came from. And Tom Cotton was one of the first people out of the gate to say that it was more than likely, nobody could say with certainty, but it was more than likely it was a weaponized virus that came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. And he got pilloried over this for 4 years. The CCP ambassador, a guy named Kui Chang Kai, appeared on Meet the Press back in 2021 with Margaret Brennan to try to dunk on Tom Cotton because of this crazy, wild-eyed idea of where the virus came from. And we learned in the Wall Street Journal, well, we being collectively the country, a lot of us kind of knew this instinctively. A lot of us just inherently knew this to be true. It was the only thing that made sense, despite what the alphabet agency heads, Francis Collins at NIH or Anthony Fauci at NIAID, came out with, saying, "Oh no, it went from animal to human in the wet market because of bat soup and all this stuff." It was nonsense. That was never the most likely candidate for how this virus got out. It escaped a weaponized lab, a lab intended to create a weaponized version of a bird flu, COVID. And now we learn from Michael Gordon and Warren Strobel that not only was this a working theory that actually had some credibility, but the intelligence agencies eventually did everything they could to stifle it and physically block it from being briefed to the president as a high degree of likelihood. So Biden, in his feeble capacity as commander-in-chief, never got briefed on this because the intelligence agencies collectively said, "Nah, we don't like this theory. We don't like the political ramifications of this theory, so we're just gonna kind of quell it. We're gonna silence it." Let me read you part of this story because it's maddening. And if nothing else, the Trump administration is going to come in and rework a lot of these agencies. And hopefully we have a lot more transparency. if nothing else. Hopefully, the government will reflect a different mentality than what has been there for the last 4 years. Here's part of the story. A car and driver had been ready to whisk Jason Bannon from FBI headquarters early one morning in August of 2021 to brief the White House on a novel virus that was killing hundreds of thousands of Americans and had stopped the world in its tracks. Bannon had been told by his superiors to be on hand just in case the FBI was asked to join a top intelligence community briefing for the president. But the White House summons never came. Bannon, a PhD in microbiology, had joined the Bureau after the September 2001 terrorist attacks in New York and Washington, when the agency bulked up its expertise to deal with the threat of germ weapons, toxins, and other weapons of mass destruction. But for more than a year, he had spent most of his waking hours on COVID-19 that had seeped out of China in early 2019. Frustrated by China's stonewalling, President Biden had ordered an urgent assessment by the U.S. intelligence agencies and national laboratories on whether the virus had leapt from an animal to a human or had escaped from a Chinese lab that had been doing extensive work on coronaviruses. The dominant view within the intelligence community was clear when Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence, and a couple of her senior analysts briefed Biden and his top aides on August 24th. But they did not brief him on the working theory that was coming out of the FBI and other divisions of government that said, no, this virus came from the lab. It's got all the markings of coming from the lab. That briefing never took place. They only told Biden what he wanted to hear, which was it was just a biological accident where the virus mutated from animal to human. You go deep into the story, and it's a long, lengthy piece. 3 scientists were there: John Hardam, Robert Cutlip, and Jean-Paul Chrétien, who conducted a genomic analysis that concluded that the virus had been manipulated in a laboratory. Specifically, they concluded that a segment of the spike protein that enables the virus to gain entry into human cells was constructed using techniques developed in the Wuhan lab that were described in a 2008 Chinese scientific paper. That was an indication, they argued, that the Chinese scientists were conducting gain-of-function research to see if the virus could infect humans. Hardam was a PhD and a Navy Reserve captain, while Cutlip, a longtime DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency scientist, had a doctorate in biomedical engineering and had served on a White House task force on the virus during the Trump administration. Chrétien, a U.S. Navy doctor, had worked on biodefense for the White House and had been in charge of the pandemic warning team for the center. They briefed their counterparts, including one of Bannon's partners, an FBI agent with a PhD, on their initial findings. But in July 2021, they were instructed by a superior at the Medical Intelligence Center not to continue sharing their work with the FBI, which they were told was, quote, off the reservation, end quote, according to people familiar with the matter. That order was earlier reported by the Australian. Nor were all of their proposed edits to the National Intelligence Council report accepted, meaning it just got memory hold. It just got disappeared. So it never made the final cut, and it never became part of the White House platform. It all got disappeared. And now we're learning what the reality is 4 years too late, which is pretty much what you can say about much of this administration. Jessica Tarlov over on Fox News looked at the, she's the resident lefty, or one of the resident lefties that appears on their 5 program. It's usually 4 right-leaning people and one lefty. Sometimes 2, but mostly just one lefty. And she's kind of the resident lefty now. And wouldn't you know that after that subway attack where a Nicaraguan illegal immigrant lit fire to a sleeping woman on a subway and sat there and watched her burn alive. Wouldn't you know the Democrats are now starting to figure out crime is a bad thing? Maybe we need to get to the bottom of this. Cut number 14.
My understanding of why Governor Newsom didn't end up backing Prop 36 is he had some proposals that he had put out himself, and there were a couple poison pills in Prop 36 that he didn't want to sign up for around the prison system. Now, he should have come out and explained that to the public, that was the reasoning for it. This is something that was overwhelmingly popular. My sister lives out in the Los Angeles area, has a lot of friends who are not political at all, and they knew everything about this race. They knew about Nathan Hochman, who is the new DA out there, who is a conservative Democrat that ran on, we cannot have someone like Gascon in this role anymore, and that people need to be able to live their lives and to feel safe while they're doing it. And what the last couple of years has looked like for some people, especially people typically of means who weren't exposed to these levels of crime before, has radicalized them in a certain way. That doesn't mean that they're waking up and saying, I want to go join the GOP, but they are looking for alternatives. And you're seeing the same thing out of Oakland, why Lennon Breed lost her race for becoming the San Francisco mayor for another term. And Democrats are, I think, seizing.
She's starting to say Democrats are starting to take crime seriously, finally, after the subway attack, after that. Look, I'm not sure they're there yet. I hope they are. We'll see. A couple of days past Christmas, a couple of days before New Year's, 25 days until we shed ourselves of the Biden administration, like just kind of like a case of fleas, just kind of get that in the past as quick as we can. I want to take a look at the market as long as we've got a minute here. And this is, of course, brought to us by our friends at AmericanFederal.com, AmFed Colden Boyan. You can call American Federal at 800-221-7694. And you should, because gold, if you look at pre-market trading today, it looks like the commodities, oil is up a little bit in pre-market trading, and the metals, gold and silver, seem to be down a little bit. In fact, gold is off in pre-market trading $12 below where it was yesterday. About $160 off its year-to-date high. So is this a buy point for you? I don't know. I don't know if I'm the one that can tell you. I'm not sure you're the one that can tell you if it's the right buy point. I'll tell you who can and whether it's a smart move or not, and that's Nick Grovich and his team at American Federal. You can go to AmericanFederal.com or call 800-221-7694. It is the best hedge against inflation. We don't know if we're done with inflation yet. We don't know what Trump's policies or if the House Republicans are going to coalesce. There's lots of uncertainty, and you should probably have some of your assets in a inflation hedge such as gold or other metals. And Nick Grovich and his team can advise you on what to do, and you should take up on that. I'll tell you the one thing about gold. It's real. It's never been worth zero. It's never going away. It is going to be there for all of time. Unlike Kwanzaa, which is not a real thing. I do this every year because Kamala Harris does this every year. And I like to point it out because it's like a Biden Amtrak story. There's some semblance of truth there somewhere that some part of this happened, but certainly not in the way that Joe Biden tells it. That's kind of Kamala Harris and Kwanzaa. Listen to this, cut number 5.
My sister and I, we grew up celebrating Kwanzaa. Every year, our family and our extended family, we would gather around across multiple generations, and we'd tell stories. The kids would sit on the carpet, and the elders would sit in chairs, and we would light the candles, and of course afterwards have a beautiful meal. And of course there was always the discussion of the 7 principles. And my favorite, I have to tell you, was always the one about self-determination, Kujichagulia. And essentially it's about be and do. Be the person you want to be and do the things you want to do and do the things that need to be done. It's about not letting anyone write our future for us, but instead going out and writing it for ourselves. And that principle motivates me today as we seek to confront the challenges facing our country and to build a brighter future for all Americans. So to everyone who is celebrating, happy Kwanzaa from our family to yours.
It is estimated that less than 2.6% of the country celebrates Kwanzaa today. And I'm not even convinced that Kamala Harris celebrated Kwanzaa as a child like she says she did. Kamala Harris is 60 years old. She was born in 1964. Kwanzaa was invented by a black nationalist kind of at the encouragement of the FBI, who was doing counter work to try to compete with the Black Panthers and kind of water them down and create competition for them, with another group by a guy named Karenga. And this Cal State professor created this Marxist wannabe Festivus back in 1966. And it didn't really take off and become much of anything for about another dozen years. It didn't become something of national prominence until late 70s at the earliest, early 80s. Kamala Harris would have been close to in college by the time anybody would have actually heard of this from coast to coast. In 1974, as the doctrines of the 7 principles were still being formed by this professor, Patty Hearst, remember her, the kidnapped victim that turned into a Symbionese Liberation Army revolutionary? She posed next to a banner for the SLA that had 7 different snakeheads on it, and all 7 snakeheads represented a principle. All 7 of those principles were adopted by this Marxist professor out of Cal State and turned that into the 7 principles for Kwanzaa that Kamala Harris now swears, oh yeah, we lit the candle and we celebrated this, and I totally resonated with this. If she did, she's just admitting she's a Marxist. If she didn't, she's a fraud. Now, both can be true, that she's a fraud and she's a Marxist. Fortunately, I think the country saw that as well as I did, and that's why she didn't get elected. I am in for Hugh because he is taking a much-deserved day off. He will be back next week on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. We will be taking New Year's Day off, and that will be a best-of program with Dr. Larry Arnn. In fact, Dr. Larry Arnn will be along in hour 3 of today with the latest installment in Plato's Republic, so we invite you to join him for that. Just a quick program reminder that this program and its confines, all of us, Adam, Harley, myself, Danielle, the entire crew, are moving to middays and or afternoon drive beginning on January 13th, if you haven't heard the news. So 9 broadcast days from today, we will give up the morning drive slot on the East Coast. Super overnight early morning on the West Coast, and Chris DeGaulle out of Philadelphia will be joining the Salem Radio Network and Salem News Channel, and he will take over this time spot. We will be moving to 3 to 6 p.m. on the afternoon drive shift on the East Coast, noon to 3 on the West Coast, which is like the best shift of all time. That's the shift we've been wanting for 25 years, and we finally got a chance at it, and we are all thrilled and excited. Our sponsors are following us over. Virtually all of our guests that we have on in the mornings are gleefully going to join us in new time spots on the new shift, and we hope you join us as well. Also, you can follow my podcast, which is Dwayne's World, by going to Dwayne.world, Duane.world. We have a new issue of Dwayne's World that drops a little bit later today, and hot air columns, all sorts of things that I have over there. And, of course, as long as we're plugging stuff, I want to remind you about the Trump inauguration VP experience, which you are running out of time to put in your entry, but you still can if you act today. Salem Media is giving you a chance to win a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have two people fly to Washington, D.C., get tickets to see Donald Trump be inaugurated on January 20th, and you get tickets to an inaugural ball. All you have to do to enter is text the name Trump, T-R-U-M-P, to 94878. That's texting Trump to 94878, and you've got just as good of a shot as anybody else does. But you can't win if you don't enter. Now, I've been putting this off for an hour because, to be perfectly honest, it's just kind of a bunch of noise, and it doesn't really mean anything long-term in the overall scheme of things. But boy, did Vivek Ramaswamy kind of get out in front of his skis a little bit yesterday. And I'm going to read you the tweet he put up on X yesterday afternoon, and it consumed all the oxygen on social media, the political side of social media yesterday. And here's what he had to say. The reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit, parens, a lazy and wrong explanation, end parens. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s and likely longer. That doesn't start in college, it starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. A culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meets World or Zack and Slater over Screech in Saved by the Bell. That was kind of a bad reference, by the way. Screech ended up becoming a real creep. Or Stefan over Steve Urkel in Family Matters will not produce the best engineers. Fact. I know multiple sets of immigrant parents in the 90s who actively limited how much their kids could watch those TV shows precisely because they promoted mediocrity, and their kids went on to become wildly successful STEM graduates. More movies like Whiplash, fewer reruns of Friends, more math tutoring, fewer sleepovers, more weekend science competitions, fewer Saturday morning cartoons, more books, less TV, more creating, less chillin', more extracurriculars, less hanging out at the mall. Most normal American parents look skeptically at these kinds of parents. More normal American kids view those kinds of kids with scorn. If you grow up aspiring to normalcy, normalcy is what you will achieve. Now close your eyes and visualize which families you knew in the 90s, or even now, who raise their kids according to one model versus the other. Be brutally honest. Normalcy doesn't cut it in a hyper-competitive global market for technical talent. And if we pretend like it does, we'll have our asses handed to us by China. This can be our Sputnik moment. We've awakened from slumber before, and we can do it again. Trump's election hopefully marks the beginning of a new golden era in America, but only if our culture fully wakes up. A culture that once again prioritizes achievement over normalcy, excellence over mediocrity, nerdiness over conformity, hard work over laziness. That's the work we have cut out for us, rather than wallowing in victimhood and just wishing or legislating alternative hiring practices into existence. I'm confident we can do it. Now, he put that out there, and the MAGA world didn't react too kindly to that. Now, Elon Musk, who is another promoter of H-1B visas, which is skilled temporary labor of the sort that, all these tech companies really are looking for. The guys that can write code, or the guys and gals that can write code and do all the supercomputing stuff. And the tech world, Silicon Valley world, doesn't want to be limited to just pulling from the United States. They want to be able to pick the world's best people, regardless of where they come from. You know, the cream of the crop is who they want to import if necessary. And boy, did that set off a firestorm. Everybody started reacting to that because the way they read that is Vivek Ramaswamy was attacking American culture. And they don't like somebody like Vivek Ramaswamy attacking American culture. And Elon Musk got lumped into that. So now all of a sudden, you've got regime media, places like the Washington Post and New York Times, that see a rift developing, a potential rift between the golden childs at the Department of Government Efficiency, the Doge people, and Donald Trump. And maybe we can exploit that rift and drive a wedge there and disassemble the whole agenda of Donald Trump before it even gets started. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Well, here's the thing. That's not the role that Vivek and Elon are going to have. They have a very specific role in this upcoming government to look for things to cut and cut them. Government waste, entire agencies if necessary, getting rid of the fiefdom within agencies that has their own little mini court system to enforce their rules that they write and treat as laws, even though the legislature has nothing to do with it. There's all sorts of things that they have on their agenda and their plate. Immigration policy is not one of those. And it's got nothing to do with the illegal immigration problem. It's even got nothing to do with green cards. We're really talking about a very niche H-1B visa, which does need some overhaul, but that's a policy decision that's going to be run by Stephen Miller out of the White House. That's not going to be run by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. So it's kind of a silly thing to be talking about, because you're kind of getting out in front of your skis instead of dealing with what your task at hand is going to be, which is going to be a monumental enough task. Now, as the hour progresses, I'm going to read you some of the smarter takes pushing back on Vivek. And some of these takes are people that served in Trump's administration the first time around, 4 years ago. There's lots of different takes on it. Maybe you've got a different take on it. You know, you can certainly write us through the app on HughHewitt.com, and we'll look at your emails. You can certainly go onto the Huniverse and do the subtext there. We will read your subtext in chat there. But there's lots of interesting reactions and some actual real smart ones pushing back at Vivek. And we'll share that as we work through the hour together. I want to take a second and talk about my friends at myphdweightloss.com. And they are my friends because Rachel has been my counselor for a little bit over almost 2.5 years now. And she is a friend because you can have all sorts of conversations with her, and she gets to know your personality. She gets to know your lifestyle. She gets to know what you like to eat, what you don't like to eat. She learns what your excuses are and how to combat your excuses for what you did or didn't do. That's the kind of the secret treatment of myphdweightloss.com. You can pick whatever amount of weight you want to lose that makes sense. You know, some people need to lose 20, 30 pounds. Some people like me need to lose 50. Some people need to lose 100 or more. It can all be done without the drugs, without the shots, without all the, the lifetime commitment to the fad new drug. But all you have to do is go to myphdweightloss.com or call 864-644-1900. That's 864-644-1900. And they'll set up an appointment so that you can actually talk to a nutritionist who will figure you out and figure out what kind of things you like to eat, what your weaknesses are, and what your schedule's like, and create a plan that is something where you can work your way through the weight loss part of it without really feeling hungry, and something that you can maintain once you get to your target weight, which is all the benefits of health and everything else that you get out of getting to the weight that you should be at. Look, we're at New Year's. This is when New Year's resolutions start. Make one of those resolutions of finally getting yourself back in shape like you know you can. MyPhDweightloss.com, 864-644-1900. I want to go back to what Vivek Ramaswamy did before we took the break. And there's lots of different takes. There's hundreds of different takes reacting to it. And I think if you want to be charitable to Vivek, I appreciate what his intent is, or what his heart is trying to say here, which is he wants American culture to get better. He wants American culture to start teaching kids to strive harder and achieve more. And I can appreciate that. Believe me, as a Christian, I know culture is in open decay all around us, and we've seen that for decades, and it's going to continue to decay. That's why we as believers try to do what we can to instill morality and faith in something real to try to combat the cultural decline. So I mean, I can appreciate what he's trying to do here. I just don't think he did it in the right way, and he's getting kind of dragged a lot online about this. My friend Larry O'Connor, who does mornings in D.C. on WMAL, for those of you not listening to us, those 4 or 5 people left that aren't listening to us in the Beltway, you probably listen to Larry O'Connor, and that's okay. Larry needs his audience. He writes about the foreign tech workers issue. I'm a father of 4 kids, aged 18 to 25. I believe I can safely speak for most of the parents of my generation. We were propagandized that our children must master STEM so that they would be poised to compete and succeed against their peers from Asia who would have an advantage in the job market for programming and AI careers. So we emphasized it, and they have either graduated or are in the process of graduating with the appropriate degrees. Now I'm told that they, for some reason, are incapable of filling jobs those very same foreign-born competitors should be prioritized to fill. Okay. Simple request for Elon Musk and Vivek G. Ramaswamy, whom I have great admiration and respect for. How about you fill all those jobs with educated, capable, and patriotic Americans like our children who sacrificed and worked their butts off for the past 10 years, and then you can fill any leftover jobs with the folks you're talking about today. Okay? Thanks. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of parents reacting like that, I think. He kind of stirred up a hornet's nest, and we'll cover more of it. We're spending most of the hour, talking about the X post by Vivek Ramaswamy attacking American culture and basically attacking parents, saying you're not raising your kids right, and until we get the culture right, we're going to continue to hire a bunch we need to hire a bunch more skilled labor, and the ones that can do all the coding and tech work. And it's not being very well received in a lot of circles on the right, and for pretty good reason. Scott Jennings, our friend over at CNN, was on last night and was asked about the dust-up that Vivek caused. Again, in regards to a subject that is not going to be in his purview in 25 days. He's going to be looking for parts of the government to cut. Government waste, the $800 hammers and the $4 million toilets at the Pentagon, that kind of stuff. He's going to be looking for agencies to cut. It's got nothing to do with skilled labor. It's got nothing to do with H-1B visas. But okay, it's the week between Christmas and New Year's. Why not? There's nothing else going on. So he comes out with this. Now, Scott Jennings had an interesting take on it. Cut number 12.
With us. So, Scott, this is like day 3 of us talking about this.
Engineers. Sounds a little embittered, maybe. Is it American culture that's the problem?
Somebody got stuffed in a locker. I'm not going to say who. Look, I think there's a way to solve this and talk about this that doesn't denigrate all of American culture. I mean, I'm now understanding more and more how he got 100 votes in Iowa or whatever it was he got during the Iowa caucus. The reality is, and Elon, by the way, clarified or further explained his position later and was talking about saying, I want to bring in the top 0.1% of engineering talent from around the world. It's like bringing in a Jokic or a Wembyana to help your whole team if you want to make a comparison to the NBA. So I think we can bring in the absolute top talent from around the world and at the same time not insult the rest of the United States of America and our culture and the way we do things here, and also lift up the American students who have the talent and who have the interest and put them in the right educational opportunities. I think what he did today was to overtalk it. A lot of MAGA people are not happy. A lot of Republicans are not happy. And this is why Donald Trump's in the Oval Office. And he's
saying
a
something
volunteer.
that a lot of people apparently believe, that it's about like the jocks being celebrated, the football stars being celebrated, and not the nerds.
It also challenges, actually raises the idea that many immigrant families have when they come to the United States.
Look, again, regime media is going to see this as a wedge issue, and they are gleefully going to try and keep this a story as long as they possibly can. So know that going in. I'm just reporting because it just happened over the last 24 hours or so, and this is what's consuming the news. I'm reporting the news. I think this is pretty much a one-day story because I don't think Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be at the White House overseeing policy on H-1B visas and immigration. That's just not his purview. My guess is he'll have had a call from the president-elect or somebody senior to him within a short period of time and telling him thanks for the input. We got this part from here. Why don't we focus on what you needed to do? Online, if you remember the primaries when we got Iowa, New Hampshire, beginning of the year. We're at the end of 24, beginning of the year. There was a large stage of people that were running: Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Chris Christie. You had all sorts of people on stage that were vying for the nomination, right? And when everybody was on stage, the two people that you could tell least liked each other, that had a very obvious aura of intense dislike for each other, was Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy. Those two, it got personal with them. Where everybody else, it was part of the game. It was part of the campaign strategy. It was part of the debate strategy. They would throw hammers at each other, but it's not that it was all in good fun, but it was never taken personally. It was just trying to find who the not Trump candidate was going to be to ultimately square off against Donald Trump. It ended up being Nikki Haley. But Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy do not like each other at all. And it was very obvious from the get-go. Why? I don't know. You'd have to ask those two. But they don't like each other. And Nikki Haley took out after Vivek online. She used this and hit him back awfully hard. I want to read you a very smart take from a guy named Jeremy Carl. Now, if you don't know who Jeremy is, senior fellow at Claremont Institute, used to be a research fellow at the Hoover Institute before that. In the first Donald Trump term, he was the Assistant Secretary of the Interior, and he's got a book called The Unprotected Class: How Anti-White Racism is Tearing America Apart. So he's studied a lot of immigration and cultural and multiculturalism, and this is kind of right up his purview. This is right up his alley, what Vivek is saying. And he is a member of Trump's administration, senior member of the Interior Department. And I want to read it to you. It's long, but it's a smart take. And maybe it will help reflect what Vivek was trying to say and what he got wrong. This is a revealing take from Vivek, and probably, judging from other comments from others on X and my own extensive personal experience with Indian Americans in Silicon Valley, it's fairly representative. Before I get to why it is fundamentally wrong in its most important particulars, let me give it its limited due. Yes, the most talented American kids probably need to work harder academically. Our public school system, especially, is generally a disaster, which I can say with some confidence having 5 kids currently in it. We need to fix it, and universal school choice will do a lot to get us there. However, having competed successfully with the top of the talent stack, my wife and I have 5 top-tier Ivy League degrees between us. And having seen what that looks like up close and made the choice to largely opt out for our own 5 kids, I think Vivek seems to have a misapprehension about the roots of American success. I knew lots of parents who made their kids grind, and yes, I did look down on them and did not aspire to that for my own kids. I did this for many reasons. First, I saw the massive burnout among such kids, even the successful ones who I went to school with. I didn't want that to happen to my kids. A career is an important part of most people's lives, but it is not, with rare exceptions, life itself. And you don't need to train most people, even at the top of your talent stack, to be those rare exceptions. Second, countries that push children to an extreme, like South Korea and China, have miserable kids and collapsing fertility. And the next generation is ultimately what we're all playing for. Third, the elite culture of these countries, including India, where I have lived, often encourages ruthlessness, lack of ethics, and rampant cheating in a desperate quest to get ahead. This ultimately bleeds over to the professional world, where IP theft and research fraud from countries like China is rampant. Of course, we're not perfect in this regard either, but we're a heck of a lot better than our competition, and it's a key comparative advantage for America. Fourth, I don't think the kind of training that Vivek seems to aspire to has created the dynamism that powered success in Silicon Valley or anywhere else in the United States. Yes, some of the people from grind culture played useful technical roles, but these companies were often founded by brilliant dropouts and iconoclasts, not the guy who was always listened to by his teacher, studied 8 hours a day, and did number 1 on the test. America's willingness to embrace dynamism and risk, to have a society in which the rule of law is honored, though Democrats have badly eroded this in recent years, and our unique culture, ultimately derived from Europe, but strengthened with our own unique pioneering American qualities, has made us so successful. It's why far more people want to come here than anywhere else, and why our tech companies are far more successful than those anywhere else. And this was true before we had mass H-1Bs. And I am confident it will be true after we shut the door on this ill-advised policy. What Vivek is proposing, however sincerely intentioned, would destroy the things that actually make America great. Now that's a very reasoned response. And, you know, I'm still trying to weed my way where I come down on this. I know it's not really, I know it's a problem that needs to be discussed and reformed at the very least in the next administration. But my gracious, if you're doing triage, if this was a patient coming into a hospital and you're trying to figure out, you know, you got a room full of patients, who needs help most? Who's in dire need of critical care? We've got to seal the border off. We've got to get rid of the criminal element that is snuck in here illegally. We've got plenty of problems we need to do. And once we can get control of the border, then we can start talking about the discussion for legal immigration. Vivek is just getting way out in front of where he should be doing, which is telling people what we're going to cut and how soon we're going to cut it. But we'll see what you think in the days and weeks ahead. We'll see what your comments are online. for the day after Boxing Day version of poetry on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hello, Joe. How are you?
Well, Dwayne, I have something for you today called The Poem After Christmas. Anticipation's over. This happens as a rule. We've burned the midnight oil and consumed another Yule. We've laid the banquet table. We've turkeyed and we've pheasanted. We made our wish lists subtly known. We've chopped and wrapped and presented. Perhaps it has occurred to you, because to me it did. I'm 1 year from the sense of Christmas as a kid, walking down to Woolworth's and talking with my boys about the latest catalogs of sporting goods and toys, going to see Santa, lining up with dozens, and later going there along with all my younger cousins. The smell of Grandma's cookies, the zing of winter weather, the noise I heard when Santa put my bicycle together. The spirits are still living and the memories are real. It's easy to remember, but more difficult to feel. Holidays can try us. They have to be so careful. And that's why I've concluded it's important to be prayerful, to take more than a minute of prudent contemplating, to call to mind the moment that has us celebrating. It matters not the month or date or season of the year. The spirit that we're longing for is always, almost here. That's The Poem After Christmas by Tarzana Joe.
That is among the finer poems I think I've heard you do in quite some time, Joe. That was remarkably well done. So is the holidays kind of a downtime as far as requests coming in to Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com, or are requests coming in for the new year like the administration?
I was very busy at the beginning of December, but now it has been a little lull, which has allowed me to do things like increase my golf score, not lower it. The more golf I play, the worse my score. But I have some poems lined up for the new year, and if you can go to tarzanajoe.com or send me an email, I'll be happy to fulfill your poetry needs.
And if you go to tarzanajoe.com, there's a little button at the top of the page that says, I want a poem, and that's what you click. Joe, thank you very much. I'm grateful that we get to roll over the calendar one more time and start anew with poetry in 2025. Joe, thank you very much.
Happy New Year, Dwayne.
And I am grateful to this audience as well. And even not just this audience, but the audience generally across the entire Salem Radio Network and Salem News Channel. The effort that all of you did for Angel Tree, the work of Prison Fellowship, was just extraordinary. The amount of money that we raised, which made a real impact in kids' lives, was entirely done by you, and for that we are enormously grateful. And this is the last time you will hear us talk about Angel Tree, at least for this calendar year. We will, of course, partner with them again in 2025. But as we end the year, that's usually the time when a lot of people get to, okay, here's how much money I have left over at the end of the year. It's time to make some charitable donations so that we can get the tax credit, the tax write-off for next April. And this is my pitch to maybe consider a year-end donation to Angel Tree. Why? Because Prison Fellowship doesn't just reach out to these kids of incarcerated parents just at Christmas time, though that is, their primary focus. But once they've had a chance to reach out to those kids, it doesn't end there, because those kids are still kids. They want to go to summer camp. They want to go to sports camps. There's all sorts of opportunities along the calendar year where there are ministry opportunities to help break the cycle of crime and neglect. There is all sorts of opportunities to bring the message of hope to these kids. And this is where your year-end donation can help fund Angel Tree, and Prison Fellowship year-round. So we hope you go to 888-206-2764. That's 888-206-2764. Or go to hughhewitt.com, and there's a banner at the top that says Change Prisoners' Lives in 2025. We thank you very much for everything that you've done. One quick note on Vivek's missive. This comes from Natalie Sauer. She is the wife of Tom Sauer, who's been on this show a bunch of times. Tom, of course, a Navy Academy vet or graduate and Navy and Marine Corps veteran who now has a foundation that helps treat vets coming back with all sorts of behavioral issues, PTSD and the such. And Natalie Sauer writes, I got a bachelor's in mathematics with honors in 3 years, and in my 4th year I graduated with a master's in business analytics. But the problem is I still can't get a decent job in tech even though I'm qualified. And as a first-year public school teacher in California, I'd make more there than I would in the tech community. Something has to change. That will have to change. But you got to do the basics first, which is get control of the border. Hopefully we will do that.